A very good evening to you. I am Dr. Ketuki Dotto, an Associate Professor of English at Bidhannagar Government College, Salt Lake, Kolkata. I am immensely grateful and thankful to the principal of Dumdum Motijheel College for inviting me to deliver a lecture on William Wordsworth. I am equally thankful to my former student, now professor of English, assistant professor of English with the Dumdum Motijheel College, who suggested my name there. I think I should be very much true to the feelings he still nurses in the deepest core of his heart for me, and try to deliver a nice lecture which will be easily comprehensible by the students and the academics alike. William Wordsworth was a romantic poet, we all know that. He was born in 1770, he died in 1850. These are all well known facts. I am not going to beat about the bush and make a rehash of the old knowledge which we all know or which we can gather from any book of history of literature. So, English literature, we do not have to reiterate all those things, but even then, we all know how Wordsworth was initiated into the world of nature, how he had become the worshipper of nature, and in the days of Cambridge and also in Hogshead Grammar School, how he thought of nature and how he loved to be surrounded by the greenery. All these are very much, familiar facts, but the facts with which we should make us familiar now are these. That is, Wordsworth advocated two things. One is, a poet is a man speaking to men, as he said in the preface to Lyrical Ballads. He had also said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Both these sentences are interlinked. When the emotions are overpowering, we need a medium to express that. I should not say give vent to the feelings, but to express those feelings. And for that reason, we choose a language which will be very much colloquial and easily understandable to all and sundry. That Wordsworth could do and is succeeded in doing. Another thing which comes with romanticism, it is in all his poems, almost all his poems, we can see that there is a love of pantheism. Pantheism, God is there in every thing of the world, be it a large one or a small one, a great one or a futile one. Pan, all embracing, and theism, belief in God. So this is a force which rolls through all things, all beings, every nook and corner of the universe. And Wordsworth also said that if we can understand man, if we can understand the feelings of man, then only we can understand nature as well. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her, and the heart that remains encaged in the ribs of a man. So man and nature, they are intertwined with each other beautifully. Man's heart throbs for nature. Nature's heart throbs for man. So nature and man, they are intertwined with each other. And from there we get the renaissance of wonder. Bishoye tahi jage, jage amar pran. In wonder, that is why in wonder my heart wakes up. My heart wakes for that reason. Rabindranath Tagore had said. Now, an underlying characteristic of romanticism is also this renaissance of wonder, which Wordsworth could understand with his heart, with his mind, with all his being. Wordsworth had composed uh, the poem The Table Stand. What did he write in that poem? He had written, I remember the two stanzas very vividly. One is, an impulse from the vernal wood can teach us more of man, of moral evil and of good than all the sages can. And he was concluding the poem with these lines: enough of science and of art, close up those barren leaves, come forth and bring with you a heart that watches and receives. Now, why did I quote these lines? In order to understand Wordsworth's philosophy a bit better. That is, again, the worshipper of nature, Wordsworth says that only nature can teach us the importance of this universe, of moral good, moral evil, than all the sages can, than all the savants can. Only nature can do that. And if we listen to the sound of music, which is latent in nature, then we do not need to flip through the pages of the books of science and arts, but we need a heart that watches and receives and can lend a ear to that noise, that music latent in the womb of nature. So nature can teach us more than any book can. And that is why Wordsworth says that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Now from here, if we enter into Wordsworth's love for man, for nature, and for his sister Dorothy, then to which poem will we go now? We will go straight into lines composed above a few miles above Tintern Abbey, popularly known as Tintern Abbey. We all know that Tintern Abbey was written by the river of Wye on the 13th of July 1798. We all know how in different verse paragraphs William Wordsworth had divided his understanding of nature. It was rather a growth of the poet's mind from being a boy who moves from one rock to the other, as in the prelude Wordsworth said that from rock to rock I went, from hill to hill in discontent, most pleased when most uneasy. Here also he starts by saying that 5 years have passed with the length of 5 summers and 5 long winters. Now you see, this passage of time, if we go into Bergsonian theory of time, this is the linear time which goes on and merges with eternity. This Bergsonian time and Wordsworth's 5 long years, if we try to club them together, then automatically we find that 5 years have passed with the length of 5 summers and 5 long winters. And when Wordsworth is still standing there by the River Wye, he looks at the years of the formative years of a poet, the growth of his poetic mind. He then judges, rather, he takes stock of the yesteryears when he was a little child, how he loved the animal movements. When the animal movements simply calmed down and he began to listen to the still sad music of humanity, then he was becoming a poet with a heart that watched and received. And of course, he said that nature has the power to make him filled with a trance. When the blood almost got suspended, he was breathing, but this breathing could not be perceived, and he could see into the life of things, being a living soul. Now, this particular trance in which he passed beside the River Wye in the lap of nature was felt by our saint Sri Ramakrishna when he said that নুনের পুতুল সাগর মাপতে গিয়েছিল সে আর ফিরে নাই. This is more than trance, this is samadhi. Trance leads on to samadhi. And that happened with Wordsworth. Wordsworth felt that his blood was not flowing through the arteries and veins. The blood flow got suspended, and he could see into the life of things. So this samadhi, or the trance which he felt there in the lap of nature, was no less a feeling, and it cannot be explained. But only this can be said, that in the lap of nature, Wordsworth had this feeling of trance or samadhi. You know, Somerset Maugham once said that in the Razor's Edge, I think there is a mention, but again in his notebook he mentioned that he came to India. He went to pay a visit to Ramana Maharishi in the South India, and there he fell on the threshold. He lost his consciousness, and then he felt that he was in some sort of samadhi, where he felt that he was getting at one, mingled with a noble soul. So you see, the literateurs from time to time, they had these feelings when they reached the acme of a feeling, acme of an emotion that took them to that height where they could feel that their existence was merged with the noblest existence of God. So this feeling also overpowered William Wordsworth. As he said, we see into the life of things. From there, if we feel the trajectory of Wordsworth's understanding of nature and the growth of the poetic mind, then we will say that from glad animal movements, he came into the understanding of man's sorrow, man's woes. I still hear oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. So man and nature stand on the same pedestal before Wordsworth. For him, the vernal wood of course can teach more of man, and that is why his hobnobbing with nature was so charming, so splendid, so excellent, so mind-blowing, and so acceptable to us as a nature worshipper as a man who takes up a pen and records everything. Perhaps here I should say that when 5 long years had passed by, and when he went to his room, to the corner of his room, to recapitulate those moments beside the river Wye, then this was something which he mentioned as his poetic belief, that emotions recollected in tranquility. Whenever we talk about emotions recollected in tranquility, we get a bit confused by the philosophy. What is that? That is, in simple words, emotions remain, you know, at the back of our mind, and then sitting in the secluded nook, we can cash in on those memories and register them either in the form of a poem or a piece of writing, or just remembering them. Yes. So emotions he could easily recollect in tranquil hours, that is, in tranquility. I feel tempted to quote a few lines which are very familiar. You are very familiar with those lines from the Daffodils. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, the flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Now these daffodils were not lost to Wordsworth when he retired to his room and when he started recapitulating the memory of those lines of daffodils which held out such a remarkable appeal to him. He started writing the poem, and that is how he recollected the emotions in tranquility. Here in Tintern Abbey also we find those emotions in 1793 had been recollected in 1798, July 13. So you see, Wordsworth was a very colorful poet. He was a romantic poet. He loved nature. And then he said that when I recollected all the emotions which were not lost to me, but I could revive them in its truest color, in its truest appeal, in its truest passion, then I could feel that though glad animal movements had gone by, there was a force that rolled through all things of the universe, and that is pantheism. And this force made him write, made him become mature as a poet, as a nature poet. And he again said that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Whatever he had lost in the process of being mature, there had been an abundant recompense for that. And that is why he could hear oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. That is why he could say that, Dorothy, you should remember that as a nature worshipper I had come here, and the memory should flow from me to you, to the posterity. And thus Tintern Abbey comes to an end. Now, I think you will be interested to know about the impact of Tintern Abbey on Dorothy Wordsworth. Dorothy Wordsworth, you all know, at the age of 69, she became a patient of dementia. In 1829 to 32, she had written a few poems, one of which was Thoughts on My Sickbed. If possible, please go through this poem. And there she is saying that Uh, uh, I stand, no, I'm trying to recall the lines. No longer is this room, is this prison room. I can stand by the river, by the green banks of Wye, with thy prophetic words, bard, brother, friend from infancy. So when she could not move, she was tied to the bed, she was bedridden, she was really terminally ill. She was saying that there is no need of any strength, of any force. But I thought of the loveliest, of nature's loveliest scenes, and with memory I was there. So the memory which Wordsworth harped on, that memory really helped Dorothy Wordsworth to recall those hours with his bard, with her bard, brother, and friend from infancy by the green banks of the Wye. So, Dorothy Wordsworth too paid not a tribute but really paid respect to her brother through these lines, that she could also recollect those times in tranquility. So the impact of lines composed on a few miles above Tinton Abbey was not really, a hollow impact, but it was a meaningful impact which made Dorothy Wordsworth write the poem, compose the poem Thoughts on My Sickbed, which had been published in 1832. So in the Tinton Abbey, what do we find? We find the different stages of maturity of Wordsworth as a poet of nature. First, during the hours of youth, he danced from one rock to another rock. Glad animal movements made him busy and made him really satisfied. From there, he could understand that this was not the summum bonum of his perception of nature. So he entered into another state of mind, that is, he tried to go deep into the philosophical mind, and he could see into the life of things in a trance, being at one with nature, in the lap of nature. Then he could connect with man through nature, and from here he could hear oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. From there he could feel that pantheism was the last word, which took in its fold not just nature but also man. So this force rolls through all the things. And lastly, he was imploring his sister Dorothy Wordsworth to remember these moments which they spent by the River Wye. And as he came as a worshipper of nature, that should also be remembered by Dorothy Wordsworth. And in the poem Thoughts on My Sickbed, Dorothy answered very befittingly to that request of Wordsworth. Now the verse paragraphs are composed in run-on lines. Why? Because Wordsworth, if he indulged in rhyme, then automatically the beauty, the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings could have been lost, could have lost its appeal somehow to the readers. Because while rhyming, there is an urgency to have uh, a check on the thoughts, on the expression of the thoughts, but in run on lines, no such urgency is there. That is why Tinton Abbey is written in verse paragraph. Now, I should harp on another poem of importance, that is Immortality Ode. This is also a beautiful poem, and I will harp on only three things. That is, whither is gone the glory and the dream? Where is it now? Whither is gone the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? Now, you see, child is the father of man, we know that. And in the Immortality Ode, beautifully Wordsworth says that man and nature, they stand on the same pedestal. From the cloud, trailing the clouds of glory, do we come from God who is our home, and then sheds on the prison house begin to close in on the growing boy, and automatically we enter into the world where we lose innocence. We enter into the world of experience, to quote William Blake. And then Wordsworth says that we should find strength in what remains behind. We should not grieve, not rather find strength in what remains behind. In years that brings the philosophic mind. I'll harp on this philosophic mind. What does the philosophic mind teach? It teaches us to be very much appreciative of the beauty of all things, immortality of God and nature. Man, though mortal, in the lap of nature, he can be immortal. And then, how does he close the poem? He says, to me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. So to him, even a little flower can bring many a thing, can mean many a thing, can wake in him many a thing, can ring a bell in him where he can feel that nature is everything, and nature can make him happy. And in nature, in the lap of nature, we can find the ultimate solace of our hearts. Now, if I do not talk about Wordsworth's friendship with Coleridge, then automatically this is not a lecture, this is just a tate-tat with my students, I should say, with the students of Dumdum Motijheel College. Wordsworth, when I went to Lake District and when I was thrilled to see the desk on which Wordsworth used to sit for many years and used to write at Hogshead Grammar School, then I tried to feel the heart, the